Boardroom. Media.
Imagine someone tells you, "We're going to reinvent the office." Not improve it. Not make it cheaper. Reinvent it. And somehow, investors believe them so much that they eventually value the company at almost $47 billion. That company was WeWork. But here's the strange part. WeWork wasn't building a revolutionary computer. It wasn't creating a new search engine. It wasn't inventing a new smartphone. It was renting office space. And yet, for a while, it looked like one of the most unstoppable companies in the world. WeWork was founded in 2010 by Adam Neumann and Miguel McKelvey. The basic idea was simple. Traditional office buildings were often expensive, rigid, and boring. A company might have to sign a long lease, furnish an entire office, and deal with everything from electricity to meeting rooms. WeWork wanted to change that. Instead of companies renting an entire building, WeWork would take large office spaces, redesign them into modern workspaces, and rent desks, private offices, and meeting rooms to individuals and businesses. You could walk into a WeWork location, connect to the internet, grab a coffee, sit down, and start working. Simple. But WeWork didn't want to sell itself as simply an office company. It sold a vision, a community, a lifestyle, a new way of working. And that vision was incredibly powerful. The company expanded rapidly. New locations appeared across major cities. Employees were hired. Investors poured in money. And WeWork became one of the biggest names in the startup world. Then came SoftBank. The Japanese investment giant became one of WeWork's biggest financial backers. The money allowed WeWork to expand even faster. And faster expansion made the company look even bigger. More buildings. More members. More cities. More headlines. More investment. It created a cycle that made WeWork appear almost unstoppable. By 2019, investors were valuing the company at approximately $47 billion. Think about that. A company built around renting physical office space was suddenly worth more than many established corporations. But there was a problem hiding underneath the excitement. WeWork was spending enormous amounts of money to grow. And there was a fundamental mismatch inside the business. WeWork was signing long-term leases for expensive buildings, then trying to rent those spaces to customers on much shorter and more flexible arrangements. That meant the company carried enormous fixed commitments. If the offices stayed full, the model could work. But if demand weakened, those buildings didn't simply disappear. The rent bills kept coming. And eventually, investors started asking a dangerous question. Is WeWork actually worth $47 billion? That question was about to change everything. In 2019, WeWork was preparing for one of the biggest moments in its history. An IPO. An IPO means a private company offers its shares to the public for the first time. For WeWork, this was supposed to be the moment when the world officially recognized its enormous value. But then investors got to see something they hadn't fully seen before. The company's financial numbers. And suddenly, the dream looked very different. WeWork was losing huge amounts of money. Its rapid expansion required enormous spending. And investors began questioning whether the company's valuation made sense. The company's planned IPO collapsed. The $47 billion valuation began to evaporate. And Adam Neumann stepped down as CEO. The company that had looked unstoppable only months earlier was suddenly fighting for survival. This is where WeWork's story becomes much more interesting. Because the problem wasn't simply that people stopped liking co-working spaces. The deeper problem was that the company had built an extremely expensive business around continued growth. WeWork needed to keep expanding. More locations could mean more members. More members could mean more revenue. And more revenue could justify more investment. But when investors stopped believing in endless growth, the entire structure became much harder to defend. SoftBank stepped in with additional financial support and increased its involvement. WeWork survived. But the company was no longer the same. Then something happened that nobody could have predicted. COVID-19. Suddenly, offices around the world emptied. Millions of employees began working from home. Companies started questioning whether they needed traditional offices at all. And for WeWork, this was devastating. Its business depended on physical workspaces. But now the world was asking, what happens if people don't want to go to the office? WeWork's own filings later described the pandemic and the shift toward hybrid work as major factors affecting demand, while the company carried expensive lease commitments. The company tried to adapt. It introduced products such as WeWork All Access, allowing members to book workspace across participating locations, and WeWork On Demand for pay-as-you-go workspace. But the damage was already serious. WeWork had spent years building a huge physical footprint. Now it had to figure out how to make that footprint profitable in a completely different world. And this is the lesson hidden inside WeWork's collapse. Growth can hide problems. When a company is growing quickly, everyone celebrates the next location, the next customer, the next $1 billion. But growth doesn't automatically mean a healthy business. Sometimes, growth simply makes an unhealthy business bigger. And WeWork was about to discover just how expensive that could become. By 2023, the situation had become extremely difficult. WeWork was carrying massive obligations while demand for traditional office space had changed. The company continued operating, but the financial pressure kept increasing. Then, on November 6, 2023, WeWork and several of its subsidiaries filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in the United States. The company that had once been valued at $47 billion was now in bankruptcy court. And the numbers tell the story better than almost anything else. WeWork had gone from one of the world's most valuable private startups to a company fighting to restructure its debts and leases. The bankruptcy wasn't simply about shutting everything down. Chapter 11 allowed WeWork to restructure. The company negotiated with landlords, reduced its future rent obligations, and exited locations that were no longer economically viable. By May 2024, a bankruptcy judge approved a restructuring plan that eliminated around $4 billion of debt and transferred equity to lenders and Yurdi systems. WeWork also reduced future rent commitments by more than $12 billion. Its post-bankruptcy equity was estimated at around $750 million. Remember that number. $750 million. At its peak, $47 billion. That is an extraordinary collapse in perceived value. Even Adam Neumann later attempted to buy the company back, but his proposal was rejected by lenders. And that's what makes the WeWork story so fascinating. It wasn't a company that failed because nobody wanted its product. People actually liked the product. The problem was the economics behind the dream. WeWork wanted to transform office space into something flexible, social, and modern. But underneath the beautiful offices and powerful branding, there were long-term leases, huge expenses, rapid expansion, and a business model that needed the future to behave exactly as expected. The future didn't. And when the future changed, The weaknesses became impossible to hide. But there is one final lesson. WeWork teaches us that a huge valuation isn't the same thing as a huge business. A company can have a powerful brand, thousands of customers, famous investors, beautiful offices, and billions of dollars behind it, yet still be vulnerable if its underlying economics don't work. WeWork wasn't just the story of a startup that went bankrupt. It was a warning about what happens when vision moves faster than reality. The company wanted to change the way the world worked. For a while, the world believed it. Then reality arrived. And when it did, a $47 billion dream became a bankruptcy restructuring. Because in business, the most dangerous question isn't, how big can we become? It's, can this business survive when everything stops going our way? WeWork eventually had to answer that question. And the answer cost billions.
This was Boardroom Media. We'll see you behind the next boardroom door.